We're all broadcasters. We've all got an opinion. But when we're interacting with a brand, we expect our voice to be heard. And not only that, we expect the brand to interact with us. People would say, well, yeah, the metaverse, yeah, that's coming to retail and it's coming, very rapidly. I'm not so sure quite about that. Number one is that you can't buy anything from that store. So they've completely disrupted the retail model. What you do is you scan a QR code.
But before we begin, a quick shout out to our partner, ImShop. This company creates the best out-of-the-box mobile app solution for retail and e-commerce. They are cost-effective, fast-start omni-channel solution with open integrations. I worked with them and I can assure the quality. imshop.io. The link will be in the description below. So now back to the interview. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome to the Digital Voice. Thank you very much for finding time for us. We're very excited to have you and to speak with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. For those listeners and viewers who don't know you yet, can you please do a brief introduction and tell a couple of words about yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, Andrew Busby, I am the founder of Retail Reflections. And I guess the best way to put it is that I've, for the last 4 or 5 years, been spending my time writing and speaking about all aspects of retail. Based in the UK, but do travel the world, or at least I used to, up until nearly 2 years ago. And just before that, actually, and towards the end of 2019, I was speaking in Moscow. Which was a great experience. But yeah, I've traveled to the US and around Europe, speaking about and retail is fascinating, which I guess we're going to get into because there's just so much to discuss and talk about, and it's fast changing, and that's really what keeps me busy. And it's a passion. I love it, that's kind of me.
Great, that's a wonderful introduction. So you actually also wrote a book that is called Harry Was Right All Along. And if I understand it correct, you're referring to Harry Selfridge, which
That's
is
right.
The owner and founder of the legendary retailer, right?
Yep.
So for those who didn't read this book, but we will leave a link in the description so you can go and buy this book at Amazon or download it there so you can actually read it. But for those who haven't read it yet, can you please maybe point out some of the main ideas? What was Harry so right about all along?
One of the reasons why I had that as the title of the book was that when you look back, because Selfridges, as people may be aware, is on London's Oxford Street, and it opened in 1909. So what's that? Over 110 years ago. But if you look back at what he was doing then and his beliefs, it's absolutely relevant to today's retail. So, and hence the title, He Was Right All Along. So, for example, what he was talking about was that he was creating an experience. He wanted to create an experience for his customers. And one of the quotes from him is that I won't quote it verbatim, but basically what he said was that if people came, it didn't matter if on that particular visit they didn't buy anything, but he wanted to create such a great experience that they came back and they kept on coming back. And so everything around the philosophy that he had was all based around the consumer and creating this exciting, this inspirational store, department store, that people would want to spend time at. And that was the other thing that he was very keen on, that people, really wanted to go there to spend time. And I thought, well, that's 110 years old. And in that time, really, apart from the internet, retail hasn't changed that much. We've the internet, which actually hasn't been with us for that long. I mean, for example, much of it now is mobile. Well, the first real smartphone, the first iPhone, was launched in 2007. So that's not that long ago. So, things have accelerated and they've happened very rapidly. But so for the most part of that 110 years, then retail was still shops, shops filled with product, and people felt that as long as they put the product there on shelves or racks or whatever, then people would come in and they would buy. And of course, as we'll probably get into in this, that's not necessarily the case anymore. Retailers need to do a lot more to entice us to go and buy and to be loyal to a particular retailer or a brand. So that was kind of why I titled the book that, and it's really a collection of tales and stories from the high street and from consumers and customer experience, and some of my thoughts and learnings over the years.
That's very interesting. But you mentioned that the customer is returning to the location and returning to the store. But how does it stay relevant nowadays? Because when we say returning to the store, it doesn't necessarily mean returning to a physical brick and mortar location anymore. We heard the term omni-channel too many times, I think, already. And what is your take right now on how relevant this whole thing of returning to a brick and mortar location is right now? What does the omni-channel have to do
Mm.
with this? And was Harry right about this?
Well, yeah, and of course, in Harry's day, he didn't understand omnichannel, and I'll be honest, I don't understand omnichannel either. And I've long campaigned, if you like, that we shouldn't be using that term anymore because to me, it's pretty meaningless. It was, I mean, when was the last time you heard anybody say, "I'm just going out to do a bit of omnichannel"? They say, "I'm going out to do some shopping." So
Yeah,
yeah, it
never.
was a term. In actual fact, the guy who is credited with first coining the phrase was somebody called Darrell Rigby in a Harvard Business Review in 2011. And when I found out, I was writing a piece about it, and I thought I'd do a bit of research. And so I contacted him and I asked him, well, what does it mean? Why did you first, and then in those days, if we remember back 10 years, um, online shopping was relatively in its infancy compared to today. Yes, we'd heard of multi-channel, multiple, but not really omni. And I think that the term was fine in the early days, but I think what we really are talking about when we talk about it now is everything everywhere. Consumers expect everything everywhere. And to your point about returning to stores, consumers expect that their experience across all the channels, and of course they don't consider them to be channels. I don't know about you, but when I go onto and I shop perhaps on my mobile or on my laptop, or I go into a store, I don't consider that I'm jumping channels. I'm just interacting with a particular brand or retailer or what have you. And the key there, I think, is that the experience needs to be consistent across all of those. And it might be that I'm perhaps before I go, depending on what I'm going to buy. Let's say, for example, that I want to buy a new TV. Now, that's a relatively big ticket item for most people. So you're going to do some research. So you might ask your friends and family. You might go onto social media. You'll probably go to the website. You'll look maybe chatbots, and you'll go into the store because it's a big ticket. So, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but I think for most of us, if we're spending, I don't know, in UK in pounds, £500 or £1,000, we really want to see it and feel it and touch it and so on and so forth. So there's all these different types of touch points and engagements that people have. That's the act of shopping. Where they buy it could be that they go into store but they actually buy online, or it could be that they go online but they purchase in store. So people are going to return. They're going to want the experience in store to always be inspiring, they don't want it to be just functional. I mean, now as an example of that, I mean, I'll admit it. I'm an Amazon Prime customer, and it's great because it works, and I think and I get a lot of value out of it. So don't get me wrong, and that respect is great. But I'm not in love with Amazon. It's functional. I went in London quite recently. I went into one of their new Amazon 4-star stores. So, for people who may not know, this is products that have got a 4-star rating on the website. Now, putting aside the fact that whether 4-star is actually accurate or not, and whether they got false reviews and so forth, as a store, it was incredibly bland and uninspiring. And you had pets next to homeware, next to books, next to electrical, next to you name it. And it was all kind of jumbled up and so forth. So I guess the point I'm making is that stores now, they need to be so much better than they used to be. And as I say, they need to inspire people. They need to, I mean, most, particularly in city centres, large city centres, most would reckon that people are going to revisit usually every 6 weeks. So people are going to really expect that there's going to be something different. If it's the same, then why bother to go back? I quite often say to retailers, well, if you're thinking about a retail destination, whether it be a store or a shopping centre or whatever it happens to be, you need to think like a theme park or a museum. So you might think, well, what on earth has that got to do with retail? Well, think about a museum, particularly when we're younger, but even now, I would suggest as an adult, or an art gallery. Around every corner, there's something new and exciting to discover. At a theme park, they're very well versed in how to manage guests, customers' expectations and keep them occupied and busy and excited and wanting to see something new and wanting to have more. Well, put all that together, that's what retail ought to be about. And I think the good news is it is moving in that direction.
But does it? Because I think that a lot of, so if we talk about high street retailers like Nike, like Adidas, yes, in their flagship stores, they would introduce all sorts of endless aisles, digital experiences, and very cool features. But is it all about business? Because if we're speaking to any of the businessmen behind those brands, they will say, yeah, but those stores are mostly about marketing. We're not even expecting a lot of sales from those stores. And I know that a lot of like local Russian retailers, big companies, will tell you that, yeah, if we do something like this, probably will be a flagship store just to put out a PR article or to gather some impressions for our social media. Everybody suddenly became very good with social media. But they will not consider this as their overall strategy for a commercial business. What examples maybe can you give us of retailers that actually implemented this experience part in their retail locations, and this actually became the part of their business?
Well, there's a very good example that I've personally been involved with, which opened in October in Westfield in London. Now, they've only got one store at the moment. It's a company called Situ Live. Now, what Situ Live is all about is they have curated a lot of different brands from Maserati. So you go into the store and there's a Maserati car sat there, but right through to Bosch, to Echelon, to Nordic Track. So they've got a bike there, they've got a treadmill, they've got a lot of them are digital, electronic. They've got Lenovo there, they've got Motorola, and they've organised them in about 6 different theatres. So you enter the store and you might be met with the fitness theatre. Then you've got a a home living room, and you see all these products. So if people are familiar with Sonos, for example, you've got Sonos speakers, smart speakers there, and they show all this within that theatre. Now, there's two things which really, really differentiate that store, which I think answers your question. Number one is that you can't buy anything from that store. So they've completely disrupted the retail model. What you do is you scan a QR code. And by the way, years ago, who thought that virtually everything that we do now would be dictated by scanning a QR code? But there you go. So if you like, let's, for example, say you think, oh, I like those Sonos speakers. I want to buy a pair. You scan the QR code and that takes you to the Sonos website or to the nearest place where you can actually directly purchase. And Situ Live take a subscription per month from the brand to have them in the store. That's how they monetize it. Second thing, and I think this is the really exciting part of it, it's not digital at all. What they've done is they've staffed the team that's there, that they've staffed well, they don't call it a store, they call it a venue. They're all budding actors. So they're all young, they're all incredibly enthusiastic, and they are storytellers. So you go and let's say you go into the living room and you'll sit down and this nice, comfortable sofa, and they'll talk you through all the products there. And then you go into the bedroom and you can lie on the bed, which does all sorts of amazing things in terms of how you can position yourself and so for a good night's sleep. And they'll talk you through what's in there. There's a kitchen, a working kitchen, and they'll cook up stuff for you. And I mean, one of them, she's leaving early 2022 because she's got a 6-month assignment at Disney in Paris as Snow White. So, and then they come from, another one I talked to, he's appeared in 1 or 2 TV series and on the stage. So what that's done, and I think this is really fascinating for all retailers and for anybody who's watching and listening to this, is no matter what you do with your physical store, a large part, and whatever digital, which I guess we'll come on to, whatever digital enablement you put in there, your people are still incredibly important in terms of bringing that to life and bringing your brand to life. And I think that's what, when you talk about some of these brands and they say, well, it's a flagship store and we don't necessarily see it. Well, yeah, I mean, I visited the Nike store on Fifth Avenue in New York shortly after it opened a couple of years ago. And that was amazing because they were personalizing things and you could, have your personalized trainers and all sorts of, and it really made people feel engaged with the brand. And much of it was about that. You know how sports, whether it be football teams or basketball, they don't call their customers, they call them fans. And I think that's what these brands, particularly the direct to consumer, like Nike, like Puma, like Adidas, interestingly, it's usually the sports brands. That's, they consider their customers to be fans and they want to bring them on their journey together. And that for me is quite an interesting thing for retailers to look at. Should they consider, their customers who walk through the door or they go on their website, should they consider them fans first and customers second?
That's a very interesting idea. Yeah, we will get to it a little bit later, I guess, because this is about the personalization. I really want to clear out this thing. It's a fascinating example of the customer journey that you gave us with this new store that opened in London. At the same moment, are you saying that everything that is a commodity, like groceries, like, I don't know, paper towels and stuff like this, or a product that doesn't need an introduction, so more or less when you need something like a commodity, something like, I don't know, headphones, you more or less understand what you will get. You don't need a demo. So all of these products will move to e-commerce because there will give you a 1 hour delivery. You will get a commodity as soon as possible, as fast as possible, and as cheap as possible. But everything that is not a commodity, and Sonos speakers obviously are not a commodity, needs this theatrical appearance around it and needs this kind of a representation in retail. Does this mean that retail will become a place only for non-commoditized goods?
Now, that's a really interesting question. And again, I can quote you figures for the UK. So pre-pandemic, so forgive me, I haven't got them for the Russian market to hand, but pre-pandemic as an indicator in the UK, the percentage of online sales as a total was around about 19%, and I've been hovering around that for years. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, it shot up to 37, 38%. Then it came down a little, and of course, we, like a lot of countries, came in and out of lockdown. And I think it's hovering around about 34, 35% the last time that I looked. Now, in conjunction with that, of course, we've seen, particularly with food delivery, we've seen the rise of people like Getir, who I think is Turkish. And they're promising in London delivery within 10 minutes. Now, okay, for food, you might argue, well, I'm very hungry, so I need it within 10 minutes. But I think for a lot of other things, you mentioned 1 hour, and that's becoming commonplace, particularly in city centres. Whether it continues like that, and whether, and maybe for certain things, perhaps you're at home and you're in your home office and you run out of printer ink. You need something, very quickly, perhaps, because you've got to print a report off and for whatever reason. But going back to the really interesting point that you made around, I've long thought that, I mentioned Amazon earlier, and that, we, as a brand, we don't necessarily love Amazon in the way that we do others, but it's incredibly easy, efficient. It just works. And yes, if I want a new printer cartridge, I don't need to go to a store and look at it and smell it and whatever. You don't feel it, obviously not. I'm quite happy because I've ordered it before. I know what I'm going to get. Same with perhaps paper for the printer, or commodity, as you say, commodity items that I've purchased before, which I'm not worried about. The quality is inherent within the product itself. If, however, whether it's Sonos speakers or whether in particular if it comes to apparel with clothing or it's a new pair of shoes, then I want to go and I want to try it on. If it's a new jacket, I want to try that on. I want to see how light or heavy, or how does a fabric feel? Does it look good on me? Now, I know that there are an awful lot of apps which are particularly for that, that will do that. Which I think is great. For me personally, I'd far prefer to go and try something on. For a lot of people, it works. Although then, of course, which may be going off topic slightly, but of course, for a lot of people, they'll bracket when they order. In other words, they think they know their size. They'll order one either side of that, just in case. And then, of course, we have the age-old issue of the volume of returns, which is a completely separate topic, perhaps. But it's the way that we interact with stores. I mean, I think I'll finish for now by saying that we are going to differentiate a little bit more between stores and online, and I think you're right that we will differentiate in terms of time, urgency, and type of product that we're ordering.
Another interesting idea. Do you think that the brands will survive this? Because if you are in a HP, you gave us an example of ink for a cartridge for a printer, like a cartridge for a printer. If you're HP, you're creating those inks for the printers. You have your own labeled, branded inks. But they are a Chinese factory, and Amazon, we know that they have a lot of OEMs. Does it mean that the brands, if they are not conveying any story behind the product, again, commoditized and easily becomes an OEM of some kind of Amazon or any other, who is now the logistics tunnel between the factory and the end client?
I think, yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I think taking the same example, it's easy to think you'd be loyal to perhaps a make of clothing, a brand of clothing, or electronics, or laptop. You know, take HP. I mean, I'm on one now. It just happens to be an HP. Be honest, whether I'm loyal to that, but it works absolutely fine, and that's great. Um, and I think, but if you take the printer cartridge, for example, well, that's a commodity. So um, one thing that more and more people are becoming is as consumers, we're becoming more and more purpose driven, and of course that then brings in the whole topic of sustainability. So in this example, if I'm HP, the story behind the printer cartridge would be, well, this is how we manufacture it, this is how we recycle it. So to give you an example, I like my coffee, and at home I've got happens to be an espresso machine, so I use the pods, but I never like the fact that I'm just throwing them away because I know they'll end up in landfill and that's harmful to the environment. But what Nespresso do when you make a new order, they'll collect your used pods and they'll recycle them. So I think that's an example of where a brand can, and Nespresso are very good at that, I think, in terms of engendering loyalty with them. You know, you buy in. You know, if you go into an Nespresso store, you know, you're buying into the whole brand experience. It's not just the coffee. Um, you know, it's the way you make it. You almost become a barista in your own right, and there are so many different types of coffee that you can buy, and I think that you know that social responsibility in terms of the saying, well, no, we'll come and pick them up from your doorstep, and we'll make sure we recycle the pods. That's all part of the overall experience, and I think more and more people are looking for that now.
Yeah, sure. About the loyalty, we hear a lot about the fact that customers are not staying as loyal as they used to one brand. Um, what trends you see here, and how retailers and brands can address this to keep the loyal customers in their funnel?
Well, I've spoken about this in the past, and I refer to consumers now that we're a bit like butterflies. In other words, we'll land on a particular brand, but then we'll very easily take off from that and land on another one. Um, so we're quite promiscuous in that sense. So I don't think we're as loyal, perhaps, as we used to be. We're loyal to our family, we're loyal to our pets, perhaps, but when it comes to brands, I think it's slightly different. But at the same time, and this is a little bit of a kind of perversely, I think there are certain brands that we do. I mean, when I'm in the States, for example, I mean, normally at this time, I would probably be speaking to you from New York because I'll be there for NRF. But this year is going to be a bit different, and you know, travel plans disrupted and so forth. Now, when you're in New York, everybody queues and is quite happy to queue to get a Starbucks coffee, and they're very, very much loyal to that particular brand. We've already mentioned Nike as another one that people are very loyal to. So I think that there are certain ones, and I think to answer the question about, you know, how do brands engender and drive that loyalty. We've partly covered it in terms, but it's very much in terms of the way that they engage. So I think now's a good time to to talk a little bit more about social media and how brands use social media. Some are very, very good. Some, frankly, are very, very poor. So again, apologies. It's a little bit UK centric, although they're international. And so there's a low cost fashion retailer, Primark, who are an Irish brand, and they have not got an online presence whatsoever. It's all stores. I think they've got about 400, something like that. They're starting to open some. I think there's a few in Europe, starting to open some in the US, but mostly it's in the UK. Now, during lockdown, when obviously people couldn't go to physical stores, on social media, they kept on engaging with their customers. It was just constant. Now, there are others, which I won't name, who hardly said a word. And guess when we came out of lockdown, guess who were the winners? So, and I think the lesson from that, and what I would say to retailers watching and listening to this, is that consumers expect you to engage with them. They have a voice now. Through that smartphone that we talked about earlier, they've got a voice. We're all broadcasters now, whether it be on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or TikTok or whatever you happen to be. We're all broadcasters. We've all got an opinion. But when we're interacting with a brand, we expect our voice to be heard. And not only that, we expect the brand to interact with us. And when they don't, that's perhaps one of the reasons that we might go elsewhere. When they do, that's a very good reason why we might stay loyal to that particular brand. So I think that's a key thing, and it's still something that many retailers, I think, they're still getting their heads around that. The role of the social media team within their organization, because in many respects, that's now their shop front. It's not necessarily the physical, because of course the social media shop front, you can get to all your customers in one go through one channel. The shop front is slightly different.
This brings us to an interesting idea regarding omnichannel. So I guess the art of the omnichannel nowadays, and I know you don't like the term, but forgive me for using it so much here, but
yeah, I'll let you get away with it.
but so many of our listeners or viewers hearing it all the time from a lot of experts, from a lot of their co-partners on the market and whatever. And it's all about orchestrating all of those front ends, because your front end now is your retail store, it's your website, it's your social media, everything, and you need to find out how to orchestrate it in a way technically. And I think it's mostly about technical execution, right? How to orchestrate it and to bring this experience like into a seamless experience, not a multi-channel experience. Probably this was. What this guy was trying to put into his word, right?
Seamless, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and that does mean that in the back end, you need to have a high degree of integration. You need to have a very clear cloud strategy, because you need to be agile, because consumers are incredibly agile. We know that they're moving incredibly quickly. So to meet that demand needs, the traditional legacy systems simply can't cope with that. It obviously depends on the size of the retailer. If it's a big retailer, then it's something slightly different. But there are people out there, and none of the brands that I'm mentioning, they're just good examples as opposed to anything that other than that. Shopify would be a good example of something where you've got, all that in one seamless. You got your POS, you got your e-commerce, you got your inventory management and so forth. So you can get up and running very, very quickly. And I think that's important for smaller retailers. Perhaps they've only got one store or maybe two or three, and they've realized that they should be selling online, but they're not quite sure how to. And one of the other things for me that came out of the whole pandemic was the rise of the live video streaming. So traditionally, people would think, well, I've got my store. I haven't been able to go online, so I can't open the door to my store. So that's it. I'm not going to make any sales. Well, actually, with live video streaming, you can. You can still open the door to your shop, and you can still connect with your customers and so forth. So I think that's another good example of technology, particularly digital technology, helping retail, where otherwise, particularly for smaller, independent, perhaps retailers, they wouldn't have been able to trade.
But do you think it will stick? This video, not the streaming, because we know that is booming in China, and this is a
Mm,
huge trend on Chinese market.
yeah.
They're spending, on average, we had one of the executives from the Alibaba Group in our on one of our interviews, and she said that regular Chinese person spends, Chinese citizen spends up to 20 minutes a day in the Taobao live streams, even without the intention of buying anything. Just they enjoy the TV shop experience, and they're just curious of what will be shown to them. Do you think this will transform into something like that? Those video live chats that we used during pandemic times for obvious reasons, will it transform into live streaming in Europe, for example?
I expect it to. How much it becomes mainstream, I'm not sure, but I certainly think that it's a way to very quickly and easily research. So going back to the example I gave about a TV, well, yeah, that would be a great way to research the different types of TVs that you might, or it might be furniture that you want to. So rather than going around to a number of different stores, and let's be honest, for some time to come, there will still be quite a percentage of people who are apprehensive about going into a store, going into a shop. So, and I don't think that will, and I think that will exist certainly through 2022. It's obviously very difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen with it. But I think that, yeah, people they'll become more comfortable with that as more and more of us. I mean, in the last 2 years, we've all become far more digitally enabled, haven't we? We've all got used to, and we're using Zencaster at the moment, but we've all got used to, there are plenty of other flavors available. We know that. It's become far more natural. Working from home, I think that and just being used to uh, interaction through a screen is going to become far more of the norm, because there's an awful lot that we can do through that. But again, we can't, depending on the purchase, we can't do everything through that. For a lot, we still want to be able to feel and touch before the purchase. So yeah, I think that we'll continue to see a growth of live streaming. And I think that'll be driven by consumer demand.
Okay. So another interesting topic is the fact that after pandemic, we see if that the impulse buying is dropping. So there are not a lot of people wandering around the aisles of the shopping mall and doing the impulse buying decisions. Do you think, and the clients are making the cycles of purchase much longer, so they are as more hesitant about what they're trying to buy, they're comparing prices and everything. Do you think that this will bring the like sort of a war or with on prices or different retailers battling each other for the best price, because the consumer, is more picky, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's probably two different things there in terms of impulse buying and then pricing and so forth. I think that we'll probably see through technology more dynamic pricing. That's a certainty. Impulse buying, it can certainly happen online, particularly if you're shopping under the influence. We've probably all, not you and I, obviously, but we all know someone who's got something turn up the next day and oh, did I buy that? How did I buy that? And so I think that the maybe unwanted impulse buying is always going to be there online. But you're right. I mean, generally, that's a skill of the store associate. You might walk into a store and you think, well, I'm going to buy a jacket, and you come out with a new top and a pair of gloves and a pair of shoes to match, and so on and so forth. But it's interesting that most of us, for value, I think we see value more than price, and for most of us, we're prepared to pay for value, which doesn't necessarily mean the lowest price. Obviously, it means perhaps that we're prepared to pay for quality. We're also prepared to pay for authenticity. So I think more and more now, combined with that purpose-driven consumer, we're more and more seeking authenticity. Now that could be through the vegetables and the fruit that we buy in the supermarket. It could be so. And as an example, I think this is where blockchain could very easily become a very, very relevant technology. And by the way, don't now ask me to explain the blockchain, but I kind of, so if you want to demonstrate the trust and the authenticity and so on and so forth, then that obviously. So I think that we're going to seek that. It could be. I mean, Burberry did this a number of years ago, where they were using RFID, and again, a bit like QR codes, RFID certainly 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. Thought, well, that's a technology that's died. Well, it's coming back, and Burberry, mainly because of the price point of the technology, but they in their store on Regent Street in London, you go in there and you could scan the code, and then a video would come up and it would show you how perhaps those particular leather boots or coat were made, and it all added to the experience of it. So I think that in that respect, it's more value than price. But again, going back to your earlier point, much of that again depends on the product. Take our printer cartridge. Well, I'm probably going to shop for the least expensive, because as long as it does what it says and it comes out and I want black, on my paper, then that's all I care about really. In many ways. Price is an interesting one in terms of, and also I think in terms of customer loyalty. But impulse I think applies to both in store and online.
Concluding our discussion for today, if you would mention the main trends or the main technologies that the retailers need to keep in mind and to look at for 2022 and maybe years to come, what would that be?
Well, I think, it is and it isn't a technology, but if I say data, and then what I mean by that is the management of data. Now, particularly the bigger retailers, for years now, they've got so much data on all of us, but probably haven't used it as well as they can. And what I mean by that is that they haven't intelligently, and that means using AI and machine learning. And again, two technologies that I'd say definitely will be incredibly important in 2022. Although still probably in their infancy, if I'm honest. And by that I mean, and connected with data. Why is AI and machine learning, and why is big data important? Well, it's important because it drives personalization, which drives the whole customer experience, which drives loyalty to the brand. Now, I would contend that the level of personalization that we all get is still pretty immature. We're all familiar with purchasing something from a brand, and then we'll get emails inviting us to purchase the same product or the same type of product. And the other thing that I would add to that is that if a brand or a retailer were to look back at, probably most of us, not all, because we all use social media to varying degrees, but there's a large percentage that uses, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, and whatever else. But if you to look back, let's say over the last 2 years of anybody's social media activity, and analyze that intelligently, I would suggest that you would know pretty much everything there is to know about that person. You would certainly know their holiday preferences. You would know if they've got a family. You would know if they've got pets. You would know probably what kind of car they've got. You would know if they play golf or they like to play tennis or whatever it happens to be. You would know all their pretty much all their preferences. Now, I don't see too much of that activity currently being translated into hyper personalization. But I think that we're going to see that. It's taking longer than I thought it would, but that's why I say data and then link to that AI and machine learning. I think the other one, which is fascinating, which I guess we have to mention, and that's the metaverse. Now, it's interesting that depending on what you read, people would say, well, yeah, the metaverse, yeah, that's coming to retail and it's coming, very rapidly. I'm not so sure quite about that. But I did see just yesterday, it was, if you're familiar with a brand called Gymshark, who started an online pure play, amazing brand. I think it's $1 billion turnover now. They're just opening their first store in London. But the reason I mentioned that is that I think it was their CEO and a member of his board posted on LinkedIn that they just had a meeting in the metaverse. Now, for me, it's fascinating and it's exciting, and the possibilities are endless. I saw something from Walmart. Again, they posted something on LinkedIn, and it was last week, I think, and they showed shopping with Walmart in the metaverse. But disappointingly, they had laid it out, in the metaverse like a store. And I'm thinking, well, surely if you're in the metaverse, you can go anywhere you like. So the example is given as choosing a bottle of wine. Great, like that. That's a good example. But I would expect in the metaverse to go to the vineyard, to talk to the wine grower, to talk to a sommelier, to engage with them and find out, well, what would you recommend, and so on and so forth. So, I think it is probably a question of letting imaginations run riot, which I'm sure will happen. And of course, we all saw the Mark Zuckerberg when he renamed Facebook to Meta, and we saw that slightly creepy video that he made about being in the metaverse. That I think has got incredible possibilities for retail. Whether it's in 2022, I think we're going to see some, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of NRF this week, certainly. But yeah, one to keep an eye on.
Very, very interesting. Yeah. Andrew, thank you very much for the inspiring themes that we discussed today. I guess that retailers are so it sounds like this is the golden time for those who are in logistics, those who are in storytelling and marketing, and those who are in creating the experiences and creating new experiences, new customer journeys. And this is very, very exciting because it will, I think, ruin a lot of brands and retailers. But at the same moment, it will bring us a lot of new ones and bring up a lot of the older ones who will do the right thing.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Very,
totally
very
agree.
interesting. Andrew, thank you again very much. We'll keep in touch, and we'll give a link onto your book again and onto your website in the description below.
That's great. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.